Oh my gosh. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Kevin. I really appreciate you making me be a part of Columbus Web Group and getting me out of my comfort zone a little bit. Also, thank you, Andy, for having us here and improving, and to the sponsors. But jumping right into it, I'm Jacqueline, and I'm an Appaholic. Thanks, guys. If you guys are sitting here wondering what the heck it means to be an Appaholic, let me ask you a quick question to clear that up. Is there anyone here tonight in the audience that has ever experienced a problem in their life and thought to themselves, if only there was an app for that, some sort of technology? Anyone? Raise your hand. Yeah? Awesome. Maybe you have friends, coworkers, family. Dad, I saw you over there. You know what they say, it runs in the family. Well, anyway, my point is I'm here to talk to you guys about a serious problem that's impacting the United States and actually all around the world, and that's an overpopulation of ideas. So the problem with an overpopulation of ideas is that shows like Silicon Valley and the media are constantly reinforcing this thought that we could all be the next Mark Zuckerberg. Or you have people who are thinking like, oh, sign my NDA before I disclose my genius idea of Tinder for pets. But I don't actually want to build that. No, I just want to sell my idea, and then they could build it. Anyone ever hear that? Well, the problem is with this misconception that's being reinforced by the media and these different stories is that the hardest part of embarking on this journey of entrepreneurship is definitely not coming up with the idea. It's all of the challenges in between. I'd like to show you guys a video clip of 4 local founders here who I think are excellent examples of entrepreneurs who have taken an idea and created a company with it. So,
hi, I'm Madison from Point. Welcome to my home office. The biggest challenge I've had as a founder has been pace. Pace is everything to a startup, and it's the reason why we find co-founders, we find funding, and if you're not on pace, it's an indication that something's wrong and it's your job to fix it. So you need to be educated, aware, you need to be brutal in making those decisions, and you need to prioritize to make sure you're keeping your company on pace.
Hi, my name is Calvin Cooper. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Row, and we are on a mission to radically expand home ownership. We've launched the world's first loyalty rewards program that gives people a return on life's biggest expense, their rent. One of the biggest challenges that people face when launching a startup in a big market that's solving an important problem is knowing where to start. And so the balancing act is limiting the scope of the product enough to enable you to get very quickly to market while also providing enough value to users so that they can give you feedback that can be incorporated into your product as you go along.
The biggest challenge when we started Group was figuring out customer acquisition. A lot of people build products but don't think about how they're actually going to get people to use it. That's a really important part. You could build a great product, but people never hear about it. They're not going to download your app or try it out. So if you're building a B2C product, you really need to think about usually marketing. And if you're building a B2B product, you really need to think about sales.
The biggest challenge for me starting Vibe was that I thought I needed funding when in reality, I needed co-founders. And once I did get co-founders and a little bit of funding, when we were taking our product to market, the toughest challenge was navigating the noise and outside feedback from people who were completely unqualified to give it. While mentorship is great, what we needed to do was drown out noise and focus on data-driven feedback.
Awesome. Well, thanks for watching that. I think each and every one of these entrepreneurs represents such a strong story here in Columbus, and it's really cool to hear that each and every one of them's challenges that they faced were different. And so today I want to talk to you guys about my story and the different challenges that I've faced while I've learned firsthand what entrepreneurship means to me. So I'm going to take you through 4 of the projects that I've worked on through the past and go through with that. But first, let me set the stage for you guys. This is me. I'm 28 years old. I enjoy traveling, drinking wine, eating Italian food, and my dog Rupert. I'm the founder of an app called Shuffle, which is my 4th project to date, and I absolutely love Columbus. I'm pretty non-technical, so I got my degree in political science from Ohio University. In fact, the only coding I know how to do is a heart on my MySpace profile back in 2005. So when they asked me to speak at Columbus Web Group, I was pretty nervous because it sounded like a super technical audience and I didn't feel quite qualified, but I thought about how many ideas people I know personally, and in being one myself, I thought it'd be super important that we could hear firsthand on the realities of taking an idea and creating a business. So I'm going to take you through 4 of the key lessons that I've learned through my journey, and each one of them follows along with the different projects that I've worked on. So you're going to hear all about when I learned what the heck it meant to build an app, down to validating an idea, finding early partners, and identifying the first release. So back when I was 23 years old, I had just graduated college, and originally I thought I was going to go to law school. But I quickly realized that I should probably make money instead of accrue more loans. And so I took whatever job I could and landed at an insurance agency. I was there for 2 years, and the one thing that always came natural to me was ideas. I was always coming up with creative things and like, oh, this is such a fun thing to think about. But it didn't take long for me to be bored out of my mind working at that insurance agency. And so one day I woke up and I was like, what if there was a Chipotle-style floral shop where we could customize flower bouquets? You know, you could pick like the type of flowers and the colors and the meanings behind all of them. It would be all online. I want to create an app for that. So I called my 2 friends in tech at the time because I knew pretty much nobody. And I pitched them my idea, literally just like that, and asked them if they would help me with the project. And they were like, okay, sure. But the thing was, I had no clue about the realities of what I was asking for, let alone the value of what they were giving me. So from the timeline, from describing product requirements, I literally knew nothing, and especially cost. I found this meme, and I literally think that's me up there, even down to the face that he's making when he's saying it. It's like, so you're going to build my app? But seriously, on top of not understanding what I was doing, I had these unrealistic expectations of a timeline. So we started talking about the project in January, and I wanted to be launched by Mother's Day in May. So that didn't give us much time, especially with someone who had no idea how to communicate what they wanted. And on top of this really pressing date, we all had full-time jobs. So the 3 of us, there was a designer, a developer, and myself, were working full-time and doing this on the side. And thinking back to it, I really think that having a full-time job, this was like my first testament into how obsessed I could become with creating my own business. It became all I was doing, all I was thinking about, all I was working on. Sorry to my boss, I'm glad you're not here. But it really was. It was like an obsession. And it was kind of a proof that this is something I really want to do. So on top of all of these constraints so far, let's add this long list of features that I'm coming up with. Because now as a founder, I have this giant vision, right? I know exactly what I want picked flowers to be. But I have no direction and I have no focus. And I think we heard one of the founders on that video talking about that focus. And it's super important because what happened was I was trying to tackle problems from the business side, solving for the floral shops. I was trying to tackle problems for the people ordering the flowers. What did they need solved? I wanted to get into weddings, events. I even came up with a subscription model. This was all before we were even live. And when I say like long list of features, I'm talking about like CVS receipt link, you know, like all the way down to the floor. That was it. But in addition to these features, what really kicks it off is everything I was asking for was for my mobile app. I didn't need a mobile app. I needed a website at the time. And I'm really fortunate the people I was working with, that developer and designer, they politely told me, they're like, listen, there's enough friction that you're going to deal with downloading apps, especially for something you don't do every day, like ordering flowers. So we're going to pivot this into a website. But really, these are all things that sound so simple, but it was a process. I was learning. And so finally, despite my horrible communication on what I wanted and inability to know what I was doing, we ended up with this website for Picked Flowers. And I must say, I'm pretty proud of it. Turned out pretty great. And after about a year, a little bit over a year, we had over 100 orders. We had $60 of boosted Facebook posts, which was quite a lot at the time. And a lot of lessons learned, like what are product requirements? I made my first product roadmap. I learned what the difference between a native app was to a website. And I really learned in all the value of product development in the entire field. So we ended up, because of like losing self-funding and not having enough money to run it myself, we ended up temporarily closing shop. So I abandoned the project, but you know what they say about addiction is the itch never really goes away. So it was only a matter of time before I was going to do this all again. And at the time, now it's 2016, I had joined a startup, actually, because I wanted to see what it was like to be a step ahead of where I was at. So I joined this company out in Silicon Valley. They had just raised their Series A. They were growing like crazy. All of the vibes that you could imagine were happening, like scooters with your laptops to your meetings and everything. It was great, but I still had lessons of my own I wanted to learn, and I had to try this again. So the next project came to me when I was on a run with my best friend. And when we were running and we were super out of shape, we would both wear headphones because we did not want to hear each other panting next to each other. I remember running and thinking, man, I really wish I could just like tap into the exact part of whatever song he's listening to so we could lip sync together. And it sounds really silly when you say it out loud, but this was like genius in my head. So I ran home, got on my computer, pulled up UXPin and just made all these wireframes that looked awful. I actually looked back at them recently. And I called up my friends, and now I've gone from knowing 2 people in tech to I'm at 6, so I'm doing pretty good. And I'm like, oh my gosh, meet me at Cafe Apropos. And if any of you guys don't know, like Cafe Apropos at the time was like the place to go. So you could have your wine, you could have your coffee, your laptop, get work done, I guess, and talk about all the crazy ideas in your head. But they met me there, and I told them the story, and I was like, okay, so we're going to get this geolocation-based platform. You're going to be able to see everyone who's listening on the same like Spotify or whatever in the area, and you can just tap, tap, tap into the exact thing they're listening to. And their faces were like, no. No way, like no developer wants to play in this area of streaming music and the royalties involved. It's so hard. No. And you know, I think it's really important to validate with the people who are building your product in the very beginning. So in this case, they were the first people I went to because they knew what was going to work. What am I not thinking about? But they also helped me evolve this into thinking about it from tapping into a live version of what people are listening to a live version of what are people doing. So we pivoted this thing. We called it Catch. And we had created this platform where now we were able to see in real time where the happy hours were going at. If it's 7 p.m. on a Tuesday, like what deal is still happening? And so that's what it was. And so the next people that I was going to validate with, because I'm learning a lesson here in validating, were the businesses who I wanted to write me checks. So I got my shoes on and I headed down High Street. I really think that I knocked on every single door business on down High Street with my concept. I didn't even have a product. I was just like, hey guys, can you look at this thing that I have and also write me a check and like sign this letter of intent? And so I got a lot of rejection. A lot of people were like, okay, come back when this is not a concept and when you have users. And man, did I underestimate the difficulty of a two-way marketplace and giving them those users. So at the end of the day, I really wanted to validate with the businesses because A, you have to prove that what you're working on is solving a problem that they care about. And B, you have to make sure they're willing to pay to solve that problem. And so after all of that rejection, I ended up with 10 letters of intent, or LOIs, and 3 checks. And I was feeling pretty good. But the next group I wanted to validate with was the people who were going to actually use the app. And a lot of times this gets overlooked because what I was doing here was setting a target demographic. And it sounds really simple, but it's a step that gets overlooked all the time. Who are your end users? And are they going to adapt to a new product? Because what I found with picked flowers, and a lesson that I learned there, was it's really hard to change people's minds. They can know about picked flowers and still use 1-800-Flowers because that's what they know. And so if you're going to create a product, you have to make sure that you're solving a problem in a way that they care about, in a way they would adapt to, and you have to understand that firsthand. So those were the 3 groups that we validated to. After what felt like a million conversations, we ended up with these wireframes, a very basic prototype, and no more friends willing to help me to build their portfolio. So I was back in this conundrum where I had no more resources again. And so this time, I was going to learn what that acronym VC stood for and try my hand at venture capital. So that was going to slide very slickly into my next transition from Catch to what's going to be Connects Columbus and finding partnerships. So I still remember the first time that I pitched to a VC or a venture capital firm here in town called Loud Capital. I'm sure some of you guys are familiar. I had just finished my first pitch deck ever, and I was super nervous. And when I get really nervous, my nose starts sweating a lot like it's doing right now. But I was standing there, and I got to my last slide, and I was super excited, and I was like, and here's my ask. Help Catch find a CTO. And I looked at their faces, and they're like, I'm like, what? And they're like, well, so you don't want money? And I'm like, no, I want someone to help me. Can you guys build this? And they're like, well, what we do here is we write checks, but we'd be happy to make introductions for you and expand your network. And they did. So they made some great connections for me. And I ended up coming across a technology firm here in town called Tyvara. And they were working on a similar product. And so I met with the founder, Brooke, and he sat down with me, and he looked at my deck. He asked me some really hard questions, and my nose started sweating again. And he's like, so what are your 5-year financial projections? And I'm like, oh, I don't know. And I told him, I was like, but I'll figure it out, I promise. And so he's like, well, we have this thing called Connects Columbus. It's solving a similar problem to what you guys are doing, but it's a loyalty program. So they had exclusive offers at a ton of local businesses, and he thought it'd be really cool if we combined finding out what was happening at all these local businesses with exclusive deals. So he said, would you be willing to come on as CEO of this product? And I was like, flattered to say the least. But at the same time, I was super desperate to see this thing happen and come through. So I was like, absolutely, whatever it is. And on top of that, oh my gosh, I have a team, like people to work with, super exciting stuff. But the thing is, partnerships are really hard. And I quickly learned it wasn't just myself and Tyvara. It was myself and Tyvara and a local radio station here. And then also the radio station had just acquired another company, which was this loyalty program. So there were like 5 people's hands in this pot and a tiny little business. And it was difficult. But what we learned quickly was radio was not the correct channel for getting downloads on a digital product. And this caused a lot of problems because having 50% of your company tied up in something that's not working causes it to fail. And so eventually, in March, Connects Columbus essentially failed. And what I like to think about this with relationships or partnerships is they're a lot like relationships in our lives. And some of them fail, in fact, most of them. But you take stuff, you learn from them, and you move on. And that's exactly what I did. So now we're at my next and most recent lesson that I've learned, which is finding out what you put in an MVP or your minimum viable product. So after Connect Columbus essentially failed, I was sitting in a room with my product manager, and he looked at me and he's like, okay, Jacqueline, what do you want this thing to be? And don't look at this because you're looking at the old product. Don't think about what it already looks like. If you could have anything in the world, what would your product be? And it kind of hit me hard because I was like, that's an easy question. I want the Spotify for experiences. And just came out of my mouth. And we both kind of sat there and we were like, and he laughed. He's like, well, this is definitely not that. But it's a starting point. So we got to work and we designed a bunch of wireframes for this ideal vision so that we could maintain that. And especially, like I said, as a founder, it's important to have that vision. But we went and we went back to square one. So now we've determined what this thing is going to be. It's called Shuffle. But now we have to validate what people will use it for. So in Shuffle, our ideal users were going to be content creators, like bloggers or influencers or social media people who had great recommendations of where to go and what to do. We wanted them to create experiences a lot like what you guys see with the coffee trail or the ale trail or the arch trail, but instead be like the Columbus foodie trail. So we reached out to about 55 bloggers, I think, and 33 of them got back to me, and they're like, yeah, I would totally want one of these things. That sounds awesome. And so 13 of them actually got us our data. So we basically took the old Connect Columbus platform, and we white labeled it to be what these individual bloggers wanted for their recommendations, their own little trails. And we were calling them playlists. And so what this was proving was that people cared. And so they promoted these links to their trails to their own audience. And what we found out quickly was that their audience cared too. But their audience wanted to make recommendations as well. So now we've understood exactly what we need for our MVP, our minimum viable product. And we didn't even need to build anything. So that was what was really relieving, and that was a huge lesson. And new features are not always the answer. And if you guys take anything home tonight with you from my talk, I really think this is a super important slide. Because too many times, especially as a non-technical founder, I find myself in this conundrum where I think, I can't do X until they finish building Y. And so I put these blockers that don't even exist in front of me, and it's not the case. Especially as a founder, be creative. Think of new ways to prove that what you're trying to build is needed. And don't use it and don't wait on technology to show you that. So I always say imaginary boundaries, they're just that, they're imaginary. So the quicker you learn that, the quicker you move forward. So back to validating the concept, we found out people cared. And so we got to work on our MVP. And when we released it, we threw a little launch party. And my product manager, again, Mark, who's in the audience, he always says, if you're not embarrassed by your MVP, then you've waited far too long. And that was the case in this. I was super embarrassed in what we were releasing. But we had a bunch of people together, and we had a goal of getting 200 different playlists put together on the app. And the best thing about this was, after people had made their lists, they've used the product, so they can give you their feedback on what's missing. And so we had so much feedback that we were able to create almost our entire product roadmap for what Shuffle is today, just from that one experience. And so in closing, I'd like to say that I'm standing up here and now I'm a professional app scaler. We have millions and millions of downloads and we're generating crazy revenue, but that's really not the case. I'm still here on chapter 4 of my career, just trying to establish partnerships, pilots, run those, trying to generate revenue. We still don't generate any, being completely transparent with you guys, and finding new creative ways to get users every single day, which is a huge task. And the fact of the matter is, I think these overnight viral successes that you hear about on the news, they're far and few between. And every single one of those has a CVS receipt link of learning that they've done to get to that point. And so I think what really separates true entrepreneurs from ideas people is the learning and the willingness to be learning every step of the way, how to get there, what the steps are, but how to be good at them as well. And also how to feel failure almost every day. And so if you guys are listening to this talk and you're thinking, now I have a new idea. Maybe thinking, maybe I'm an Appaholic too. And you're not ready to admit that you have a problem, then you can join us at Drunk Pitch on October 24th. Thank you.
As far as we're aware, the pigeon does not have a name. So if anyone would like to name him or her. Clay. Clay? Okay, so Clay the pigeon is going to join us up here. Don't shoot it, please.
Am I joining? Okay, sure. Yeah.
You are also going to have to repeat the question for the recording.
Okay.
So you talked a little bit about Shuffle.
Mm-hmm.
Can you dig a little bit more into exactly like what it is and what it does?
Yeah, so Shuffle is a platform where you can create playlists of places and things to do. So if you think of like Spotify for music, it's like that for locations.
And where can you get Shuffle?
So you can find it in the Android app and the iOS app store as well.
And could you, so you mentioned Tyvara a little bit. Could you expand on what exactly Tyvara is?
Yeah, so Tyvara is a technology firm here in town. They run a program called Tyvara Labs. And what Tyvara Labs is it allows all of their employees to spend 25% of their time on internal ideas and internal products so that they can strengthen their skills, take them to market, and learn new things. And so Tyvara does that as well as product development and design.
So before you went on stage, you were talking a little bit about music. Can you tell us a little bit more about why you only listen to 4 songs?
So when I'm stressed and I'm trying to get something done, I'll typically put on like either 1, 2, 3, or 4 songs and just listen to them on repeat for like days on end. And so it helps me. I don't know why. It just does. Anyone else? You don't have to raise your hand for that one.
And the last question before we open it up to the floor is, who's your favorite organizer for the Columbus Book?
Kevin! Sorry.
So now we're going to open it up on that note. And just remember to repeat the question if someone has it. For the
Okay. Okay.
So anyone, just raise your hand who has questions for Jacqueline.
Yeah.
Come up here.
Yeah. Now too?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, we set up this nice little chat. Yeah, sit down. Get us in the chair.
You can pretend this is a microphone.
So, persistence is definitely one of the big takeaways I took from your story, which is admirable. But I'm curious, what keeps you like going after apps instead of saying after like, I don't know, 3, like, you know what, I'm gonna try to find another passion.
Because this is my passion, and it gets me up every day, and I'm not where I want to be. So I have so many things that I want to accomplish, like on this journey, that I just haven't crossed off yet. Like, so I think that just helps keep me moving forward as goals and personal aspirations and things that I want to check off the list before I throw my towel in.
Yeah. Is there like some vision of this will be like, I will feel like I made it and I'm good here and I don't have to like question what I'm doing. That's not like being the next Facebook.
Being the next Facebook? No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, so I'd like to personally have higher numbers in downloads. I think that's a good one, just very realistic here. But also some of the partnerships that I've been working on, I'd like to see go through and be able to scale it a lot more. So I don't know, does that answer your question? Repeating it, yeah. Sorry about that. Okay.
Don't feel like you have to come up if you want to just stand up where you're at.
But it makes it so much more fun.
Come up, Chris.
I'm just gonna ask you from here. What's the coolest playlist someone's put together so far on Shuffle?
Awesome. Okay, Chris asked, what's the coolest playlist that someone's put together so far on Shuffle? I have a lot of favorites that I've seen. Let me think about this for a second. I'm a big fan of all the taco playlists because I really like tacos and I'm hungry. But also, I think there's some really cool like arts ones and different things you could do around town. And I'm a big fan of all the itineraries and all the places I've never been. So I'm trying to check out some of these ones in Boston in particular. Yeah. Oh, none. that was it. Yeah, I just texted Kevin one day. I was like, "How about this?" And he was like, "Check."
Short decision on that one.
So about instead of other names for the presentation, how about instead of Shuffle?
Yeah.
Ideas?
Yeah, so we toyed around with the word place list instead of like playlist and calling it that. There were definitely names that came up that we ruled out. Trying to think. Mark, do you remember any of them? Other names for Shuffle before we landed on that name. Well, it was Catch, and then it was Connects Columbus, and then it was mine. Any other questions? Yeah.
You talked a lot about MVP, which is always a useful reminder. Have you thought about your minimum viable audience, the minimum number of users or places you need to make it fly?
Yeah. So that was also kind of like a learning curve for us. We started off with just showing only what was in Columbus. And so then we quickly realized, like, there's so much hidden content on this app right now that no one even knows you can switch the locations. People are asking me all the time. They're like, so is this just in Columbus? I'm like, you could literally make a playlist in Africa right now. So we added just recently, actually within the last 3 months, just popular destinations just at the top. Like, hey, go here, go here, go here. And there's definitely like a sweet spot of number of like content, I would say, rather than users, because users can create multiple lists. And so it's nice to have like 5, I'd say, in each city, but yeah. Thanks for asking. So minimum viable audience was the question.
Just one, I guess.
Okay.
Is how long did it take from the time the first line of code was written
Yeah.
until it was ready for release?
Great question.
How did you find it?
Yeah. Wait, what was the second part of it?
How long did it take to put the app together?
Mm-hmm.
And then how did you find those people? How many people did you have work on it?
Yeah. Okay, so the question was, how long did it take to put Shuffle together and how many people were working on it? We started working on development in July of 2018. And in July, we wrote like the first line of code. We had all the designs done, and then we released the first version of it, first iteration, on November 29th of 2018. So it took 6 months. Math is not my strong point, so you know. And then I work with a team at the technology team at Tyvara. They have between 3 and 4 developers that were writing code 25% of their work week for that time period.
Is there another hand back there somewhere?
The question was, if I heard you right, have I thought about making more applications and using experiences like this to... Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So in every project that I've worked on to date, I have taken lessons and things that have worked from other projects. So I would say it was like a great step. Yeah, steps all the way up to where I'm at now. Yeah.
At what point did you approach investors or VCs and things like that to get started? And did you actually do that before you started on Shuffle?
So yeah, I've had conversation. The question was, at what point did you approach investment opportunities with Shuffle in particular? Or okay. So with Shuffle in particular, Tyvara was funding a lot of this development. Now, for things like marketing and having funding on hand, we did approach and pitch to investors. However, we have not yet raised any type of seed funding, and that's intentional now. We're definitely trying to bootstrap as long as we can, and make use of what we have. But the conversations have been had back in the early stages before it even launched, and it's more just maintaining those relationships at this point.
What's your current marketing strategy for Shuffle, and how are you bringing on new people to use your app?
Great question. The question was, what is my current marketing strategy for Shuffle, and how am I getting people to grow? So right now, and like I just said, we don't have like a budget for marketing. So I do a lot of events and go places and preach like some of those people on the side of the street to download my app. But in addition to that, we do like to leverage people like influencers and people with an audience to share their experiences. A lot of what we built is in that social network vein where there's kind of that ego that's involved. Like, oh, I know the best places to go in Columbus, Ohio. Like, you got to see my playlist. And then people disagree, and they're like, wait a minute, let me build mine because I have a better idea than they do. So that's helped with some organic stuff, and opening that platform to allow everyone to be who goes in and views other people's content to then create their own really does create that organic, natural loop for like viral growth if it were to hit viral growth. Does that answer your question? Awesome. Is there any other questions? Okay. You first, and then.
So far, what's been your favorite playlist after Shuffle? I downloaded the app and I just wanted to see like what it was like, seeing like the playlist come up and like what your favorite one that you've seen is so far.
Yeah. So the question was what my favorite playlist is, and I think someone else asked the same question in like a little bit differently of a way, but I really like a lot of the food ones, and like I said, I think I said the taco ones are my favorite, but lately I've been looking at a lot of the itineraries that have been built in places that I haven't been, and it's making me want to like jump on a plane. So I found a few playlists in Boston that I was really interested in just hiking out there. Thanks for asking. Did you still have a question? No, I think that's a great question. The question was where I see myself in 5 years, given the last 3 years have been this psycho roller coaster. And to be honest, I would love to see myself scaling the shit out of Shuffle and making this thing giant. So I think we're right on the cusp. And maybe if I say that out loud, it will come into fruition. But yeah. No, to be really honest with you, I have no idea. I'm still probably going to be making sure something happens. So there's going to be checks on my bucket list of life that are going to be marked off on my career path for sure. It's just I'm not sure which ones they are. I hope that answers your question. Okay. Go ahead. Okay.
So I found with myself that one of the biggest challenges is you can build the most beautiful mall in the middle of the desert. Nobody knows it's there. It's all for nothing.
Yeah.
So in the realm of marketing, have you tried or have you had any luck with Facebook? Because this is a very geolocated type app, so it's marketed to people on Facebook in that geographic location. I don't know if you've tried stuff like that at all, or if you had any luck with either Facebook or Google Ads or anything like that.
Yeah. So a little bit. And the question was, just to recap it, that if no one knows about it, then and no one can use it. But if we've tried things like Facebook and specifically ads on Facebook, and yes, we've actually been focusing a lot on Instagram. The reason that we chose Instagram to focus a lot of our marketing efforts was intentional. And that's because we noticed a trend in blogging that was going towards people investing their time into writing content on these long-form blogs to moving towards just upkeeping their Instagram profile pictures. And when we did interviews with potential users and our target demographic, the way they were solving those problems a lot for like, hey, I'm going on this trip to Los Angeles. I need to make sure I go here and take my picture in front of here, was like screenshotting people's Instagrams that they were following and then losing them in their screen roll. And so, and getting these people who are going to this platform already to answer some of the problems that we're solving, it's been a pretty successful like conversion rate with our clicks. So that's where we focused a little bit of our tiny marketing budget. Yeah. Oh, right behind. Yeah. Go ahead. Okay.
I'm curious, with all the ideas that you've had, if there was anything related to political science or the law that like is still interested in?
Yeah, that's a great question. The question was, am I ever going to use my degree? No, it was if I've considered taking my political science background and applying it to what I'm doing now. Is that correct? Great. So the answer is yes. And the startup that I mentioned briefly in my talk was, it was called OpenGov. So it was working in government, and it was something that was really cool, and I really enjoyed my time that I was working at that organization. But right now, I think there is a lot of opportunities with other projects that are surrounding that space, and like polytech, is that a term? That are solving a lot of the problems that I'd be interested in solving right now. So all I can do in that case is support them and get behind them and advocate for that. Yeah.
And then I had a question for you. But I'm in consumer marketing, and one of the big trends that we see out there is personalization of data, and I don't think it's going away. I think people kind of expect it and demand it. So how does that fit into your roadmap for Shuffle, and how do you guys see that coming to life, whether that's current state and then even future state?
That's an amazing question. Her question was how personalizing the data that we get plays into our product roadmap. And one thing I really didn't mention at all past the functionality was the data that we're receiving. And I think Shuffle has an advantage with being able to combine and collect data on like businesses, like platforms that don't exist right now. So a lot of the ways people find similar business type data is through mining Yelp reviews and Google reviews and stuff like that. And we actually collect that, how people are putting that together. And so I find that to be super valuable and something we're going to hang on to as far as an asset to our company. So
if there probably have time for one more question, I guess. I said that was the last one, but if anyone has any final wrap-up questions, raise your hand. All right.
Come up and
okay. So the question was my favorite show about entrepreneurship that kind of revolves around what I do. And to be honest, I never watched shows that touched work because it was like too work. But I just started watching Silicon Valley, and it's funny. It's really funny, but it's nice to like do it after things have calmed down a little bit rather than during, because I think I would have a heart attack. But no, I like Silicon Valley a lot, actually. Yeah. Actually, I'm a serial killer. Shameless.
All right, let's get Jacqueline.
All right. Thank you guys so much.